I remember vividly one Easter morning when I was a small child, maybe 5 or 6 years old. And this was the first Easter in which I had finally graduated. I had graduated from wearing matching outfits with my older sister. No more knee socks and saddle shoes, John Johns with my initials monogrammed on my chest to match whatever her dress was. I remember feeling so proud and honored and excited to go to church on that Easter morning. And on the way there, my mom reminded us that we would take that family picture after the service so not to get dirty, not to mess up our clothes. And I promised that I would. I wouldn't play outside or spill anything on it. I was going to look my best for that picture. Our family station wagon pulls into the parking lot, and my mom gets out and runs off to choir practice, leaving my dad and my brother to help escort my sister and I into the church. But right as we're getting close to the doors, we see friends of ours in the side yard talking, and so they go in, and my sister goes with me to chat with our friends, talking about important things like how much chocolate have we gotten already that day? Being thankful that surely Jesus loved chocolate, and that's why we get it on Easter. And so as we're there in our little group, this kid who's twice my age and known for bullying others came up and thought it would be funny to push me into a mud puddle there. And I remember lying there in my new clothes, a mess, confused, sad, and frustrated. Someone ran off to retrieve my mom, and we went into the bathroom to try to clean up as much as we can, but the stains were already setting in. The mud was all over me. It was the first time in my life that I remembered being resentful, having an anger towards someone else, and seeing that we're surrounded in a church, wondering how something like this could happen there, a place that's supposed to be safe and comforting. And why would a church let such a person in? It was a moment of feeling negative, a moment of feeling empty. The women today in Luke's gospel make their way towards the tomb. And as they approach it, they see that the large rock in front of the opening has already been moved. And they make their way in, and they find that it's empty. The only thing there is the laundry left over from where Jesus had been. And we listen to the roller coaster of emotions that they go through in this reading. They are perplexed. And then 2 men standing in dazzling clothing are beside them, and now they are terrified. But it is then they remember the words of Jesus. They remember the story of the resurrection. And now this emptiness that is inside of them and this fear is now filled with joy. And it's with that joy that they receive the energy to run and to go and tell the other disciples. But they will be disappointed again as they share this news, this good news of joy. The disciples do not believe them at all. They treat them like a child making up a story. And Peter, in his own disbelief, gets up and goes to the tomb himself. And he finds it empty. And in finding it empty, because of the words of the women, he too is filled with joy and amazement. And the church, as followers of Jesus Christ, has begun. And that news will spread not only to those who gather to wait to hear from Peter, but for those who gather here on Sunday morning in All Saints and in every church around the globe, where we hear the resurrection story. It is a story of emotional roller coaster riding. I wonder, what was Peter's conversation like when he returned? Was there an apology? I wonder what the conversation was like between my mother and the parent of that child who pushed me in the mud. Answers we will never know. What do we do with a space that becomes empty, with a space that becomes negative? A year ago, we had a very talented designer who worked with us at the church on coming up with a new logo. And the logo is made up of the doves. And this image of the dove can be found, I'll show y'all, can be found in our patio area outside of the cloister. And as it was being explained to me, this powerful image of the dove, I walked away with one piece of knowledge that I have lived with ever since hearing it. We see how the doves all come together from 4 different places, and as they come together, when their wings begin to touch and their mouths become close to each other, it is in this space in which the cross is made. And the phrase that has stayed with me, that in the designer world, this space is called a negative space. Because if you remove the images, then nothing is created there in the center. It's only by them being connected, wing to wing and beak to beak, in which the cross is formed. And what does that mean for us as a church? I think it's a wonderful image for the church to be a place of emptiness, a place where we can feel comfortable with the negative. Today we have come together and put on our Easter best. We have come to this space. We've come from the 4 corners of Richmond and so much further from beyond to come together and to be connected. We come with different views on life, different stages in our life, different places in our own spiritual journey, but we come. We gather, we connect, and we gather all. We gather the bullies and the saints, and we gather the rest of us that fall somewhere in between the two, depending on where we are in our life, where we are in our own journey. The church is called to be a place where we come with who and what we are. And as we come together, that we begin to look within ourselves and to say, what is in my life that I want to get rid of? What are ways that others have hurt me? What are ways that I have hurt others? And what do I do with that negative stuff? We pour it into the cross. For if the cross is a negative space, it is a place in which we can pour all that negative part of our own lives, hurt that we have made ourselves, hurt that others have brought onto us, and we leave a little bit at a time on the cross. If we believe in the power of the resurrection, then we know that the cross has to come before the joy of the resurrection. And even in today's gospel story, after the resurrection has taken place, we continue to be on that emotional roller coaster of joys and lows, right? There is so much sadness out there in the world. Brussels rings in our ears. What do we do with all that sadness? Despair, disease, doubt. We bring it as a community together. And God doesn't want us to come in with it and then just carry it back out again, but to find a way that we can let it go a little bit at a time. Because it's only when we can empty out that stuff that is going on in our life that we have space that we can be filled with God's joy. If you really want to make hot chocolate, but you only have one cup, and the cup you have is filled with vinegar, tastes bad, smells bad, you've got to dump that cup out first, rinse it out, and then you can put something good and joyful in it. We look within ourselves and to say, what can I empty out? Because Christ's love and Christ's sacrifice was for this very reason, so that we can move away from the things holding us back, so that we can rise in little moments of resurrection all the time. And this is the great joy. And this is why it is a wonderful image to think of the church as a negative space. It is a space where we can come and work through those turmoils in our life so that when we go out, we are strengthened by Christ's love. We're strengthened in community. But we resist. Anthony DeMello gave this wonderful antidote. What is love? The true absence of fear. What is it that we fear? Love. The disciples are afraid to hear the words that the women share. To be in a church with someone that has hurt you is fearful to do. But it might be the very thing that Christ is calling us to go and to dump it out, to pour it out, to create an emptiness so that that emptiness can be then filled with God's love and it can be filled with joy. So that each time we leave a place of true community where we're wing by wing and hand, heart by heart, we can be strengthened from one another. Joy. Joy of the resurrection. Rising up and becoming something new, something better, something of love. to get rid of all that muddiness that we find ourselves in. Surely Peter felt empty, and we all know it wasn't the first time that Peter felt empty. There are many times in our lives where we feel empty, and we ask ourselves, what do we want to be filled up with instead? The church is the right place to do it. If not, we find ourselves living in that word that I learned way too young, of resentment. Because there's nothing outside in this secular world in which we live in which we're going to find a way to get rid of all that negative, dirty laundry of ours, whether we created it or someone created it for us. The church is a place where we can come and process. And just like the women who were perplexed and terrified, we process it through listening to the words of Christ. Don't you remember what he said? Do we listen? Do we yearn to be filled with something that we can't find beyond a community of followers? For this is the good news. This is the resurrection. This is the joy, the willingness to come together so that we can leave changed, the willingness to find strength in one another so that we can take one step closer to wholeness. Amen.